Hello, and welcome to my channel, Inner Creed. My name is Doc Roberts. My friends call me Doc. Today, I want to talk to you about past life regressions, and not just past life regressions, but past life regressions from the perspective of me having the experience of having taken individuals through their past lives via hypnotherapy. In terms of understanding the nature of who I am and my history in relation to hypnotherapy, I basically became involved with hypnosis as a result of seeing a gentleman by the name of Dr. Walker. Uh, I was age 17, thereabouts, and I moved on to basically learn the art, firstly from him, and moving further along, studying other persons like Dolores Cannon and so on and so forth. In terms of my overall experience with past life regressions, I've done a number of persons to the point where I feel comfortable now, like that I can write a book about past life regressions. And I would like for this introduction to YouTube to basically be a place of reference, so to speak. Through the course of this particular live stream, I'll be looking at three case studies in particular. We will call those case studies Mr. Panda, we'll call them the Reverend, and we'll call the last case study the Queen. Yes. I'm going to use those names basically to keep persons anonymous. And for those of you out there who are watching me, to give you an idea of where I'm broadcasting from, I'm broadcasting from the Bahamas, by the way, which is approximately 30 miles off the coast of Florida in the USA. So basically, you might get a different perspective from me coming from a different country from the US. So bear with me moving forward. Okay, so I gave you a history as to how I came into hypnosis was via seeing Dr. Walker perform it and learning therefrom. Um, to understand what hypnosis really is, basically, in a nutshell, hypnosis is the tapping into the subconscious and what I come to now deem as the superconscious of the individual that is before you under hypnosis. In terms of your day-to-day moving about, you will find that you are able to function in a conscious state, which you would call conscious. And when we take our patients or clients under into the hypnosis state, they are moved into a place of extreme relaxation, and they are moved into a place whereby the animal brain is made to rest and stop its consistent actions or activities. And we tap into the subconscious first. Now, I must give you a little clarity on my background even further. I come to you speaking as a former ordained minister of the gospel, one who considered himself a Christian. And it was not until I came into the deeper realms of hypnosis and having deeper experiences that I had to reconsider the whole religious construct in itself and had to reconsider the paradigm that I followed and the paradigm that I was presently pursuing in the Christian faith. It is not that I no longer believe in God. It is that I have a more clearer understanding of that which I define and deem as God. What you're going to find, or what I found, I should say, I should keep this as me centric, seeing that I'm here to give you some understanding of this thing. What I found was I was catapulted into a place whereby what I was taught in places like seminary, what I was taught in the church under my church elders in terms of understanding the nature of God was basically not correct. That is the purest way I can put it. It was basically trying to describe something that was the size of the Empire State Building, but yet you only using the knowledge base of an ant, and that in itself created a state of cognitive dissonance. I started on a journey, some would call it an esoteric journey, which led to me leaving the church in a formative way after having pastored the church and so on and so forth. I left the church and I went on to pursue this esoteric pursuit of my definition of God. And in the journey, I studied things such as Hermetics. I studied things such as the Kabbalah. I studied even those things that were considered taboo. I studied the traditions of Ifa. I studied the traditions of Voodoo. I studied the traditions of the seven powers. And I tried to understand what these religions and what these beliefs were trying to convey. And what I found was their very core, these religious or belief systems were leading back to one thing, one being, one spirit, one entity, which was the all encompassing of all that we consider the universe and what we consider reality. Whether we call that spirit or being God, the Ancient of Days, the Most High, whatever you call that entity, the reality is religion became something for me whereby I had to walk through certain doors to understand the true nature of that which was my creator. Now, the thing with past life regressions and the religious path is you'll find that many cultures use hypnosis as a means of bringing clarity to the life that is coming into this world. For instance, within the Ifa culture, within Burkina Faso, for instance, the elders in that village, for instance, if a lady was carrying a child, they would place the mother under hypnosis. And in the process of placing the mother, hypnosis would speak to the soul of that child. Now, this is another thing that past life regressions did for me. It gave me clearer understanding of what the true nature of the soul is and what the true nature of the oversoul is, and a clearer nature of what I define as God is. Because if I was to break it down in its clearest form, as simply as I can, using the ocean, for instance, the ocean in its purest form would be what you would define as God. And then if you were to go to that ocean and dip out a bucket of water, that bucket of water would be a soul. Now, the thing is, the bucket in itself, which is housing that water or housing that soul, is what has become the body, the body. And in the midst of that, the water that is in that bucket has a separate experience from that ocean. Now, to understand the true nature of what is going on, the soul or the body that you are presently in, the avatar, whatever you wish to describe this physical body as, this physical body is merely a construct that was created to house the true you, the true you. Now, you would call the true you your soul, and that in itself is somewhat selling it somewhat short. Why I say that? The true nature of the soul is such that the incarnation or the experience that you're having now in this life is just a fragment of your true soul. And when I say a fragment, let me see if I can describe it even clearer. If you were to take a gob of paint and just put it down on a piece of paper, and you were to add, say, the color white to that color, say the original color is red, and you were to add white to it and more white, you see the nature of the color changes. Well, to compare the soul to that gob of paint, the original soul, the original nature, the original makeup of you is such that you are, in its purest form, you are that original gob of paint. And you have to be placed in a situation where you live many different lives. But the truth is, in living the many different lives, you still have a core essence, a core eternal mind, because really and truly, that is what the soul, the true nature of the soul is. It is an eternal mind that simply comes down into this reality and takes the housing of a physical body. But the nature of that oversoul, and the oversoul is different. I must stress this. The oversoul is different from the soul itself, because the soul itself is just a fragment off from the oversoul. And going even further back, the oversoul is just a fragment from what you would define as God or source or your creator. So here it is, you have a three link prong scenario. And in this scenario, it is one whereby past life regression hypnosis allows you to access the oversoul, and it allows you to access all the past lives that that soul lived. Now, there is a particular way that these things have to be done in order to ensure stability within the client or the patient. I must stress that, because there's a scenario whereby most persons who know the art of hypnotism know that there's a methodology of induction. And but what most general hypnotists do in terms of their general hypnosis, they generally just deal with the surface subconscious. And when I say that, they dealing with subconscious issues like the root of smoking cigarettes, or the root of what certain habits and proclivities that need fixing. But what was found to be the case was a scenario whereby a lot of psychological issues and a lot of psychological problems were not being able to be fixed in this surface area. And what individuals like, for instance, Dolores Cannon, and individuals like Dr. Brian Weiss, for instance, if you want to find some of their reading, you can find things on Dolores Cannon, writings like books like Convoluted Universe and things of that nature. You can look at Dr. Brian Weiss's book, Many Lives, Many Masters. Uh, you can even look at some of the writings of Dr. Moody in relation to past lives, if you want to get a little more insight into past lives and past life regression. Now, I know this video is going to cause a lot of issues with my Christian brothers and sisters out there, because most of them, they do not believe in this. But here it is, if you speak to your Jewish brothers and sisters out there, you will find that they are cognizant of past lives through their Kabbalistic tradition. And it is somewhat funny, because if you read the traditional King James Bible, for instance, examples of referrals to past lives, for instance, could be found in one, when John the Baptist, who was the precursor to Jesus or Yeshua, When John the Baptist came out of the wilderness, persons thought that he was the reincarnation of Elijah. Same thing with the Christ. When he came forward, persons thought that he was the reincarnation of other past prophets as well. And this is something that is found throughout Christian doctrine and dogma. It's just that most Christians are afraid to accept that this is there. Um, Good day, Lady Tinker. Thanks for joining in. Today we're talking about past life regressions. So taking it even deeper, what you'll find is the Kabbalists within the Jewish tradition have accepted that past lives and reincarnation as a doctrine and as a dogma exists, but it does not exist in the Christian doctrine, because what it does is it causes cognitive dissonance, because then certain things such as hell and heaven has to be given more explanation as to the truth and the true nature of what these things are and what they truly are. And what past life regressions have shown is there are realms and there are dimensions and there are multiverses. And what it has shown is that though we see ourselves merely as human, the reality is one that we are multidimensional beings. And when I say that we are multidimensional beings, I speak from the place, here it is, you have first this physical body, this is the outer shell. Then you have an emotional body. Then you have an etheric body. Then you have a mental body. Then you have a spiritual body. Then you have a soul body. And all of these bodies are existing all at once in time and place and in space. And what hypnosis through past life regression does is it allows you to access those individual bodies. Like, for instance, let me give you a working example of some of the things that past life regression has been able to fix from a psychological perspective. For instance, the client that I spoke about, the second client, we'll call him Rev for the purpose of this exercise. Rev, for a number of years, going on to maybe 5 or 6 years, he suffered extreme intestinal pains and heart issues that felt as though he was having a heart attack. He basically sought treatment from doctors for more than 4 years to try and fix this particular issue. And basically, what transpired was he spent a lot of money. And one day, while he was in the midst of his extreme pain, he asked me if I can hypnotize him to see what the cause of this pain was. So he was placed under hypnotic induction, and as a result, he was carried back through previous lives. And it was what came to light was his immediate past life played a major issue. And because he found his immediate past life to be a thing of pleasure and bliss, and then coming into this new life, finding it to be a life of chaos and a life of lack and a life of disparity. Sorry. And we were able to basically address those issues in his past. And literally within seconds of him waking up from the hypnotic induction, Rev was healed of his pain. And what we found in his particular case, in his particular situation, he had I guess you can call it an emotional tie to money, whereby whenever he was in a place where money was coming in freely and in large amounts, it caused him internal conflict based on the lessons that he was taught as a child in this life and as a child in his past life. And as a result, he had difficulties accepting money or accepting abundance into this present life because of what he was taught about money. For instance, he came up the son of a pastor. And in the midst of that, he was basically indoctrinated and taught, sorry, that money was an evil thing. And what you will find is a lot of persons don't realize that their internal conversation with money, their internal conversation literally creates the atmosphere of what they experience in this reality called life. And that is one case of using past life regressions to fix a present life situation. To give you a working example, today's date is January the 8th. That session was done on him a few weeks back. And from that time to now, his company was able to secure a contract for $380,000. And it was as a result of removing certain blockages within. And he was able to manifest freely and deal with the manifestation coming in. In terms of the methodology of past life regressions, it is basically the same as a normal induction process, whereby you will have the client sit down in a comfortable chair, or you would have the client sit down in a uh, long sofa, and you, the the counselor, would basically take a position and carry out the necessary induction. Now, what I said earlier about the methodology of induction is such that when you look at traditional hypnosis is basically, I call it performance hypnosis. And this is where people would hypnotize persons to quack like a duck and all that stuff. That is literally found in the immediate subconscious. Now, here it is with past life regressions, you're going into what is considered the superconscious. And this is where the oversoul resides. And this is the soul within. This is the real core of that individual that you are interacting with. Here it is. Most persons think that when you speak to these individuals while they're under hypnotic trance, that the messages or the conversation would be cloudy. No, I've had individuals, like for instance, the client I spoke about, the queen. In the midst of her induction, she would literally, based on which lifetime she's experiencing, she would come up and be animated and all of this other stuff. And literally that lifetime, that life or that person from that life would come into full being. And what it has allowed me to do, let me take you even further. Here it is. At my core, I am an historian. I'm a historian. At present, I am working on writing a book on Atlantis. And the reason I'm writing that book on Atlantis is because, one, I live here in the Bahamas, and I've done approximately 10 years of research on Atlantis, ranging on everything from looking at what Edgar Casey pronounced while he was under trance in relation to the Bahamas and Atlantis, speaking about the Bimini Bridge just north of here where I am presently located. Also, him speaking to the pyramid just south of where I am here. What I have found is I've been able to take persons back to different time periods. And I've also been able to take persons back into different lives lived on other planets. I know this may sound way out there for some of you, but bear with me. What it has done for me is it has allowed some clarity in terms of coming to understand biblical references like the Elohim, and understanding biblical references referring to those who came from up above and those who fell and all of this stuff. It has allowed me to actually go into these places and explore these regions and explore places in time and truly discern historical fact from opinions placed out there. And what I found is what it allows us to do. Hey, cuz, welcome to the chat. What it allows us to do is it allows us to visit not only the lives of that individual that they lived, but it allows us to visit different periods in history, uh, as well as different locations. For instance, I've been able to visit ancient Egypt as a place in time and space. I've been able to visit Lemuria in time and space. I've been able to visit what you might call it, Egypt, Atlantis, Lemuria, Mars, Venus. Now, here it is to an individual who was not being exposed to the other doctrine. And when I say the other doctrine, I make reference to writings like the Nag Hammadi scrolls. I make reference to the Sumerian tablets. I make reference to the Bhagavad Gita. And I make reference to all of these other accounts of life in other cultures and past and their experiences with their what they define as their gods. And what I've come to find is there has been consistency in terms of what took place, but because persons writing and accounting of what took place was in different cultures and so on and so forth, they were not able to realize that this was one global event and so on and so forth. For instance, the flood in Noah, in the Bible about Noah and the flood, for instance, what I've found is if you look at other cultures, if you look at the writings within the Upanishads and things of this nature, what you will find is they give accounts of these things as a global scenario. And if you want to go even further back, I know I'm going to say some things that is truly going to offend those who are Christian minded. But if you examine the writings of the Sumerian tablets and their account of how man came into being, uh, for instance, they believe that man was created as a work being, a work creature by beings from another planet, whom we in the biblical context call angels. And they call those individuals those who from heaven to earth came, the Elohim. Um, if you want to now go deeper, how it ties into the past life regressions is what past life regressions has been able to do is, for instance, three of those persons that I made reference to, Mr. Panda, Mr. Rev, and the Queen. Three of those persons had lifetimes in Atlantis that they remembered clearly and vividly, and they were able to give me information that was not in the general text and reading. For instance, they were able to give me geographical locations with more clarity. For instance, here within the Bahamas where I'm located, they were able to give me the location of four pyramids. And right now, I was able to locate one of those pyramids using Google Earth as a result of the information that I was able to get through those persons there. For instance, I've been able to get a clearer understanding of how large this place is. Most persons think that this place was just some small little island somewhere tucked away outside of the Straits of Gibraltar. But the reality is what I've come to find, especially in communicating through the Queen. For instance, she lived a lifetime that was 600 years old in Atlantis. and she was able to account right up until the ending part of Atlantis. And the strange thing was her son in that lifetime was the individual who was responsible for the original demise of Atlantis itself. So here it is, going into past life regressions, you get to encounter some interesting things and you get to encounter some interesting facts. Uh, for instance, a lot of things that we deem as mythological or things that would, like, for instance, entities like the Minotaur and the half man, half horse, and all of these things will be, for me, via this process, I was able to place them in context. For instance, if you read throughout the Sumerian tablets, what you'll find is that before man came into being, there were seven versions of man that was created. For instance, the first version of man that was created was unable to speak. Another version of man that was created, his knees could not bend. Another version of man that was created, he was unable to reproduce. And it was only up until the seventh. Now, keep in mind, this is what the Sumerian tablets tells us. I don't want to argue with my Christian brothers and sisters out there. This is what is in the Sumerian tablets. If you're interested in pursuing the Sumerian tablets and seeing the direct translations yourself, you can check out the University of California at Berkeley, their website. You can literally take the actual cuneiform tablet and place it into their library, and it's translated right away. But I digress. Here it is. I was able to garner a throng load of information through having the queen under hypnosis and taking her back to her life there at Atlantis. Now, out of those three, Mr. Panda was the first that gave me insight into Atlantis. He lived three lives in Atlantis. The other one, Mr. Rev, he only lived two lives in Atlantis, but those were short lived. Here it is. Most of us, we would have experiences what we'd call deja vu, or we would have very vivid, very nice, clear dreams. And we just say we dreaming about this and we dreaming about that. And what I've come to realize is a lot of our dreams that we experience is actually us recalling what took place in different past lives. Now, what I've come to find is the number of lives differ from person to person in terms of past lives. For instance, Mr. Panda, in terms of his tally of lives lived, he tallied up somewhere about 681, if I remember correctly. Mr. Rev, he tallied up at 1,500 thereabouts. And then the reason I call the queen is because she has lived 65 eons. And in terms of her calculation of time, she considers one eon to be 65,000 years. So that would give you an idea of how long the stretch of memory of that particular oversoul is. When you hear me talk about oversouls, here it is. Okay, you're looking at me and you're saying, okay, this is Doc talking to me. But here it is. Within me is a preliminary soul that is living the life of Doc. But here it is, behind or even deeper in that soul that is this reality, even deeper than that is what is the oversoul, which is the true you, who is literally still in direct communication with your creator. This is the place where you would get spiritual spark and spiritual insight from. Here it is, for instance, if your oversoul decided to commune with your creator, which you would call God or source, the most high, whatever you want to label it as, what happens is your oversoul opens up that connection and it allows some of that connection to come into this soul, and this soul experiences it in the body feeling. For instance, when you see individuals having what is known as the Holy Spirit and so on and so forth, it is simply a matter of them having a little spark of that come into this present soul experiencing this life. And what I found is persons who may not want to undergo a past life regression hypnosis session can actually access their past lives through a process of meditation. And what I found is this is actually an easier, more slow introduction to one's past lives, because here it is. You may wonder why you may have an affinity for a particular place, a particular country, a particular location, and not realizing that, hey, I have this affinity for this place, not realizing it is because you lived a past life there. And that is coming into this experience. Another example, you may have an affinity for a particular language. You might just love the sound of a particular language. And it may be a scenario whereby you would have lived and spoke that language either in a life that you had a very pleasant life, or one of your earlier lives that truly ingrained itself on your oversoul as an experience. Now, here it is, a lot of persons may say, but Brother Roberts, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in past lives and all of that. And I believe that I only have one life to live. And when I die, that's it. It's a wrap. It's over. I believe that God is going to judge me and I'm going to be sent to either heaven or hell. I got news for you guys. Like I told you, this stuff cost me to leave the church, okay? And I'm having a brutally honest live conversation with you. Keep in mind, I was an ordained minister. I preached on pulpits in New Providence. I preached in pulpits in Grand Bahama. I preached in pulpits in Abaco. I was an associate minister at a church in New Providence. I was an associate minister at the church in Grand Bahama, and so on and so forth. So for me to tell you about this, and not to even mention that you must understand the nature and the culture from which I come as a Bahamian. To say these things publicly is considered somewhat taboo, is considered occultish, is considered beyond the beaten path. But I live a life now where I must live in my truth of what my reality is. And if I was to sit in this chair and tell you that I do not know how to hypnotize individuals and have them go back through past lives, I would be lying. This is something that I've been able to do from I was 17 years old. And I have, I, I don't mean to brag or boast. It is something that is natural to me. It comes natural to me. And I understand why. I won't reveal why here, but it is something that is very natural to me. Now, here it is. When we look at, let me give you an idea of what my first oversoul encounter was. Now, what you're gonna find is when you encounter an oversoul, you're encountering a being that has lived thousands, if not thousands and thousands of years. So here it is, the level of insight and the level of wisdom that that being has is not normal. It is extraordinary, to say the least. And here it is, you have an opportunity to question an individual who knows how the universe was created. You have an opportunity to question an individual who gives you a higher understanding of what God truly is. You have an opportunity to speak with an individual who is cognizant of past, future. Here it is, I'm going to say something that is going to even sound taboo to my Christian minded brothers and sisters out there. You have an opportunity in this process to speak to the angels of that person, the ancestors of that person, And I'm going to add something new that a lot of persons out there on YouTube don't even really talk about or address. There is a category of being out there called the Fae. And the Fae in itself attaches to some humans, believe it or not, as guardians and as watchers. But we getting too far of ourselves here. So here it is. If you have a situation, what I've found is using hypnotherapy in past life is best used to alleviate situations that persons are dealing with in this present life. I found individuals who have cases of unknown migraines, individuals who have situations of neck pains, back pains that have no origin or root. I found it is a situation whereby we've been able to find the root of these situations and resolve them to a place where the person is literally 100% resolved in their being and in their moving forward. In terms of what happened to me in the initial phases of having to accept the fact that past lives were a reality and past lives were real, I suffered a lot of cognitive dissonance. When I say I suffered, keep in mind I was brought up in a very traditional Christian home. I was brought up in a home where members of my family are all either pastors and ministers and so on and so forth. This is the background that I have. One half of my family bloodline, the majority of those persons are fundamentalist Christians. And my initial upbringing was under my grandmother. She raised me uh, up until I was approximately 8 years old. And going to church in a traditional sense was the order of the day. Uh, Here it is. I was raised in a combination type of faith whereby my grandmother was a staunch Anglican, so I would pursue the Anglican faith. And on the other side, my grandfather was more Baptist, but he never went to church. But my grandmother was very consistent. She was to church more than Pastor, the priest, Father Thompson. She was there more than he was. But I say all of that to say this. I've had to do a lot of inner searching. I've had to do a lot of inner analysis in dealing with this whole construct. This isn't something that I just, just easily have come into. This is something that I've had to ingest and deal with over a period of years because it meant having to divest myself of certain ideas and certain constructs of what is reality and what is truth. And what this has done is this has given me a lot of clarity in that vein. And would I do it differently? No, I am grateful. Um, in terms of the encounters, oh, I mustn't forget, I got to talk about life between lives and I got to talk about death. It would be nonsensical to talk about a past life regression if I don't tell you about what I encountered in persons having to deal with going through their death. Um, yeah, let's start with death. A lot of persons fear death, and they fear death because they don't know what's coming. They don't know what is going to be next. And what has been one of the fundamental things with those who've undergone hypnotherapy, past life regressions, is they have all released and relinquished their fear of death. And they have all come back perceiving and seeing their creator differently than they had perceived their creator prior to this experience. For instance, the average individual in my country has a very staunch Judeo Christian view. And they feel that if you live a particular way and you do certain things, you're going to get into heaven. And they feel that if you live a particular way and you do certain things, you got to go to hell. Here it is. That doesn't exist. Hell, as you define it, doesn't exist. That thing that you define as fire and brimstone, that place doesn't exist. But there is a place. In fact, there are three places below this realm, below this dimension, that you can define as hell. Uh, those realms and those dimensions are for individuals who simply refuse to grow spiritually, to grow in the soul nature. Those realms are the realms where most souls go to when they live a life that is filled with regret. Uh, those realms are the realms that souls go to when they live a life that was not grounded in some type of spiritual grounding, some type of religious grounding, and had no real sense of self, and they had no real sense of that, of there being something greater than self. And these are the lower realms that these individuals go to. Now, here it is, persons talk of torment and they talk of brimstone and punishment and all of that stuff. What I've encountered with these individuals is the place that these individuals define as hell is a place where that soul literally gets an opportunity to basically revitalize itself and revive itself. And that is what has been the overarching scenario. Uh, in terms of my personal views, in terms of whether I believe in heaven or hell, I have come to a place where I realize that these places exist, that we would define as that. But in terms of what we were taught that they truly consist of, it is not that. You see, it is not that. Because what hell in its purest form truly is a mirror reflection or a mirror image of this realm, of this reality. And what it is, um, the account that has been given to me by persons who had to undergo this soul reconciliation, this soul fixing. That's the best way you can put it. Because the reality is a soul will go through a lot of trauma in this thing called life, whether that trauma is rape, whether that trauma was being murdered, whether that trauma was being abused by parents, whether that trauma was being abused in a marriage scenario, whatever the case is, the soul that is living this life will undergo trauma, and the soul that is living this life will take hits. And when that soul, when this body dies, this soul leaves this body and goes into what is considered the fourth dimension. In this place, based on the life that you've lived and the energies that you have accumulated in this life that you've lived, you will be placed in a place of recycling. Here it is when I say recycling. Okay, now I don't want to have you think that this is justification for sin or this is justification for you to live a life that is offensive to your fellow human beings. For instance, an individual who was, say, a bad father, not knowingly, say this is an individual who spent his life focusing more on money and not so much on his family and not so much on his children. Say if this is an individual who spent most of their time engaged in bad habits, say alcoholism, drinking, and things of that nature, and that individual never develop a life whereby they would become spiritually grounded. And when I say spiritually grounded, just the acknowledgement of knowing and accepting the fact that there's something greater than thyself is the beginning of that journey. Now, whether you pursue a path of Christianity, Islam, or the Jewish faith or Buddhism or Hinduism. What I found is individuals, no matter what faiths they pursued, once they were grounded, they never went to that place. And when I say grounded, what you will find is there's a core element in all religions, and that core element that I found is simply love. And what happens is when a soul first comes into this dimension, the primary lesson he has to learn is to love. Because what love truly is, most persons think that love may be just sex, or they think that love is something that is the gifts you get and give. But love is more than that. Love is more than an emotion that you will have from just eating a bunch of chocolates. Love is more than lust. Love is a frequency of being. And what the purpose of this life truly is, what I'm coming to understand, is that the true purpose of this life is to embrace love, embody love. And in the embracing and in the embodiment of love, you begin to emanate on that frequency of love. And as a result, your soul, your oversoul in particular, expands and grows in power and strength and dimensions. Because most of us, we see ourselves as separate and apart from God. That is what is wrong with most individuals. That is why most individuals cannot manifest the reality that they want to manifest, because they do not understand their divine nature. Okay, I'm going to keep it as Christian as possible so that you can understand this. Here it is. Psalms 82 says that you are gods. You are gods, but you are destined to die as men. I'll say it again. Psalms 82. If you think I'm joking, search it for yourself. Psalms 82 says, you are gods, but you are destined to die as men. The very book says that you are God. You don't like to even think of that. Some of you out there watching this video right now are actually thinking that that is blasphemy. You're thinking that that is sacrilegious. You're thinking that Doc is going to hell. Guess what? The same Bible that says in Psalms 82 that you are God's, it goes on in the New Testament where the Christ, the Yeshua, the Christos, the Messiah says that he and the Father are one. He and the Father are one. So if you think, let's go even further. If he said he and the Father are one, if you take it further, it goes even further. Beyond he and the Father is one, he says to you that you are joint heirs. Joint heirs. See, I spent 4 years studying law down in Barbados, Cave Hill. And there's one thing that I understood with some contract law. If you are a joint heir, it means that it is a joint inheritance. It means that it is an equal portion to be disseminated. So if you are a joint heir with the Christos, it means that you have within you that Christos. Now, we don't like to call that Christos the Christos. We call that Christos a soul. A soul. Your soul is no more than a fragment of God. You are God in flesh having a human experience. See, we like to say that you are a spirit having a human experience, or you are a spirit having a flesh experience, but I'm taking you even further. Remember the scenario where I showed you the bucket of water from the ocean? Is not the water in the bucket the same as the water in the ocean? Well, that is what you are in relation to God. You are a fragment of God. And most persons have difficulties coming to this understanding. And that is the reason why they live lives of less than. Until you accept your divine nature, until you accept your divine mission and purpose. See, for me, my mission is to be a teacher. Until you accept that, you will have difficulties. And that is why theories like past life regressions are somewhat hard to digest for most, especially those in the Western Hemisphere. If you go to places like India and China and Japan, these constructs are common. These are common. And the thing with the Western mind, that is the thing. The Western mind has difficulties accepting the fact that maybe we're not right. Maybe those who came before us had a deeper understanding of what truth is. I'll take you further. Here it is. We spend our whole lives saying we want to know what took place in the past. But on the walls of those pyramids and temples within Egypt, you have the story right there in front of you. But most of us, when we hear the true story of creation, as was handed to those ancients, or when we see or we read the story of creation as is had in the Sumerian tablets, we have difficulties accepting the fact that maybe these people would take this time to chisel out into walls this information because it is so important. It is so important. Here it is. I was about to get into the concept of death before I got waylaid, so forgive me. In taking persons through the construct of past lives, one of the things that I would normally do is first I would take them into their mother's womb, and then I would take them into the place before this life. And then I would take them back to the previous life. And after I've reviewed that life with them, then we would come to the death of that life. And the thing about doing past life regressions and going through the death phase, that you must understand that that individual is experiencing the actual feelings of that process that they went through then. It is as live and it is as real in that instance as it ever was when it took place in time and space. And we're going to talk about time and space because we can talk about that in a different video altogether. But the construct is when you take a person back through their death process, what you will find is they experience those same pains, the same shortness of breath, the gasping, the same pain at the site of injury and whatever the case is. And then the soul exits the body and the pain ceases. In terms of the time frame of actually that process, individuals have accounted on average experiencing the death process lasting anywhere from 3 to 7 minutes on average. In terms of what they said was most of them had the initial onslaught of that pain. And once the reality of what was going on set in and they realized they were dying, they said that in most instances, a calmness or a peace came over them. And they say the next thing they were out of their body and they were viewing their body from another perspective. And most of them explained that they experienced a situation whereby they had an expanded sense of consciousness and they did not feel pain anymore. Most of them explained that they went either up a stairway towards a light or they went through a tunnel that came into a light. Some persons would account having relatives who they know to have died previously, meeting them at the end of this tunnel. Others would have recounted having the deity that they served in life meeting them at the end of the tunnel. So here it is, those who were of a Christian orientation found that uh, the Christos or Jesus or Yeshua avatar met them. Those of the Hindu and the Buddhist faith and so on and so forth experienced that reality as such. Now, when we when we talk about the actual place that they're in, most persons described it as home. They described it as home, but they also said that they had a sense of another home, and that they knew within that that home was with the divine, with God. Now, here it is. In this place, they were able to interact and see deceased relatives and communicate and so on and so forth. And it was not a forced recognition scenario. They instinctively recognized these individuals and so on and so forth. And most persons, if it was truly up to them at that juncture, would not want to come back. But because we are on a journey and a path, the best way that it was described to me was that we are on a journey down this corridor called life towards this door. And on the other side of this door is our creator. And in order to be able to commune fully with our creator, we must go through the process of dealing with the seven sins. The seven sins. What are the seven sins? You know what they are. Things like sloth, greed, lust, envy, those seven sins. So we live a reality whereby through the passage of all of these lifetimes, we are faced with tests and trials and tribulations, whereby we are faced with dealing with these seven cardinal sins, these seven vices. And it is only once we have mastered and being able to face these seven vices or these seven temptations through these lifetimes are we able to come into this pure state of being where we can commune with the creator. So the best way to put it is we are in a pathway down this corridor of purification. We are going to be faced with distinct things in life. Whatever issues you're facing in life, know that those issues are meant to strengthen you. Those issues are meant to have you grow. Those issues are meant to basically take you to another level. Most persons look at trials and tribulations and as a weighty thing. What I have found through past life regressions is the trials and tribulations that you would face in life is merely a test. It is a test. And most persons think that they are not equipped to deal with the tests that they are facing at hand in life, when in reality, they are more than well equipped to deal with that test based on the history that they carry within them. That is one of the reasons why in the esoteric world, the fundamental rule is to know thyself. We spend most of our lives trying to live externally when the true life is to be internal. If you are to live a true life, you must live a life that is internally anchored. It is internally anchored to a higher spiritual truth. And based on that, you will be able to see the life that you want manifest therefrom. Okay, so death in itself, not most, all the individuals that went through past life regressions, all of these individuals lost their fear of death, all of them. They now have a state of being. They are now of a state of mind and consciousness where they see that this life is transitory, but not just transitory. This is a part of their overall evolution as a soul. And they come to grips with that. And what they find is it impacts their behavior. It impacts the way they deal with life. It impacts the way they deal with this three-dimensional reality. So, so if we see it from that perspective, there is a life between life. There is a life between lives where you do a purification process. There is a process of death, and I don't mean to alarm you, but there is a period of 3 to 7 minutes of discomfort in detaching from this body. What it was described to me was that the soul is anchored into this body at key vital points. Some people would call those chakras. Some people would call those meridian points. But as it was broken down to me, is the soul is anchored into this body at key vital points, especially within the torso area of the physical body. And when the physical body is incapable of functioning in a healthy way, whether through injury, whether car accident or other injury, whatever the case may be, the soul within that body cannot function properly in terms of receiving data and transmitting data. So that soul will leave that body and go towards the light. We'll talk about the light in future videos in terms of what is really there. Um, you must understand that in order to come to a higher truth, you have to relieve yourself of fear of the unknown, fear of what could go wrong, fear of right and wrong. Because what I found is our construct of these things are all wrong. For instance, most of us living in the Western world are impacted by what took place at the Council of Nicaea, for instance, under the Emperor Constantine. And we do not understand what and how that impacted us and how it impacts our way of thinking. But I digress. In terms of the death issue, in terms of the life and the rhyme and the reason for living, the reason most individuals come back and say is the purpose of the reincarnation cycle is to grow spiritually, it is to grow internally, and the growth comes through knowledge of having new experiences. And the reality is one whereby you must come to a place in your understanding where you must literally do the things that you fear, because on the other side of your fear is the very thing that you desire, the very thing that you want to have. So I would tell you to approach your spiritual life through fearless eyes. Um, and don't just go by what you were told by those who came before you. I would bring to you the little story of the little girl watching her mother prepare the ham for Christmas dinner. And she noticed that her mother cut off the edges of the ham before putting it into the pot. And she asked her mother, "Mummy, why are you cutting off the edges of the ham?" Uh, Her mother told her, "I don't know. This is how I saw my mother do it. So maybe you should ask her." So the little girl went to her grandmother and asked her, "Grammy, why is it that you guys cut off the edges of the ham before you cook it in the pot?" Her Grammy laughed and her Grammy said, "Well, we did that because the pot that we have was too small for the size of the ham. And to make the ham fit, we had to cut off the edges." How many of you out there are living a life, living a reality based on information that you were told was truth, afraid to actually explore real truth, afraid to go into those esoteric hidden corners of truth. The very books they tell you not to read should be the books you should read. The very things they tell you not to try and understand should be the things that you should understand. Because what you need to understand is the opposite of love, believe it or not, is fear. Fear. Most of you think that the opposite of love is hate. I said it right the first time. I wasn't mistaken. The opposite of love is fear. Fear. Love attracts things. Love draws things. And fear pushes things away from you. Fear repels things away from you. And you will not understand how powerful religious doctrine and dogma is until you understand the notion of fear that you have. For instance, I've encountered individuals who have a literal fear of money because they embrace the the scripture. They heard it halfway. Most people think that money is evil. They think that money is wicked. They think that money is wrong because they would have heard that the love of money is the root of all evil. You hear what I say? The love of money is the root of all evil. Money is a tool. You, uh, a carpenter does not love his hammer. A carpenter realizes that that hammer is his tool to get work done. So money is that tool. But you came to that understanding based on the doctrine and the dogma that you encountered and experienced. So with that, I think I'm going to bring this particular video to a close. I think I've touched past life regressions enough in this video. I just want to thank you all for joining me, Master Higgs, Lady Tinker, and all others in this video. If you enjoyed this video and you actually stayed here to the end of this 1 hour and 12 minutes, please like and subscribe to my channel, Inner Creed. I'm going to try and do more lives because I think I have the right flow and the energy for it now where I can have a comfortable discussion with you guys out there. So until next time, just like and subscribe and take care of yourselves. This reality that you are living is pliable. You can change the reality that you are in. If you do not remember anything else from this live video, remember that the reality that you are presently in is pliable. It can be changed. It is changed through thoughts and intention. You must embrace the thoughts of the new reality that you want to have. And once you embrace the thoughts of the new reality you want to have, embrace the emotions of having that thing. And once you embrace the emotions of having that thing, you will manifest that thing. This is Doc saying thank you for signing in. And if you haven't done so yet, like and subscribe. And until next time, peace, love, and all that good stuff.